How's it going, everybody? Welcome into the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Today, I'm going to be going over day 12 of Packers training camp. The numbering is a little bit interesting because there have technically been, I think, 11 open practices now, with family night kind of counting as the 12th. There's also been 2 closed practices, one that was open to the media, one that wasn't. So however you want to count the numbering is kind of up to you, but I'm counting it as day 12 of open practice if you include family night. So day 12 of training camp. Let's jump right in. Before I go over the details of what actually happened at camp, a couple news and notes items. Randy Ramsey placed on injured reserve. Technically, they waived him injured first. Some team could claim him, but that's not going to happen. So he will revert back to injured reserve, and that will end his season. So I know you might be, some of you might be thinking, well, Andy, you can come back from injured reserve. Not if you're put on injured reserve prior to cut down day. Remember, you have to survive initial roster cuts and then be on the active roster. And then once you're on the active roster on Monday, then you can be placed on IR and return back at some point during the season. But if you're placed on IR before those final cutdowns, at that point, you're no longer eligible to return. I'm not really sure why they do it that way. It's more so like you can't stash players, I guess. But in Randy Ramsey's case, that will officially end his season. It's possible that if he's healthy to return prior to the end of the season, or if he's healthy at some point, that they would need to, kind of waive him injured, if you will, which would allow him to play for another team at some point. Probably not a huge deal one way or the other, but it is a loss to the Packers special teams. Ramsey was unequivocally one of their better special teams players and definitely came on strong at the end of last year in that regards. And they don't really have that player. Tipa Nalii will need to be somebody who potentially steps up in that rotation as a potential, outside linebacker special team star, if you will. We'll see if he has the ability to do that and if he can survive the initial roster cuts. But for now, Ramsey will definitely be missed on special teams. They're a little bit thin at that edge rusher position, especially right now. If you remember, Zadarius Smith's still not practicing. Rashawn Gary's out hurt. So you got Preston, you've got Jonathan Garvin, Tipa Nalii. It's a lot of these, kind of younger players that are going to need to step up. So obviously outside Preston Smith. But even when they're healthy, you've got Z, you've got Preston, you've got Rashawn, which is a pretty good, trio of players, but not that fourth guy. So Jonathan Garvin, Tipa Nalii, the two that you're probably hoping most can kind of step up and take that on, but only time will tell. In the other roster move, they signed Dominique Martin, a cornerback who used to be a wide receiver, who is now turned cornerback. Certainly not something that Green Bay has shied away from with Sam Shields, KB Anento, etc. So this is definitely a route they've gone before. Dominique Martin should be active, I would assume, for that first preseason game. He won't have any practices left, so I guess welcome to the team. You could see your first snaps with the team as in a preseason game without having any practice really beforehand. Tough to say how much time he could actually get, but as you get into those third, fourth quarters of the preseason game and are just trying to get guys out there, we could potentially see Dominique Martin out there at corner and likely maybe get a look at special teams. Otherwise, maybe they hold him for the next preseason game, but another player on the roster that we'll kind of keep track of moving forward. All right, let's get to practice notes. So first of all, a lot of returns from injury, which was a really great sight. So Kevin King, Stanford Samuels, Kingsley Keke, Isaiah McDuffie, Kamal Martin, and Chris Blair all returned from injury. Now, not all of them, did team drills. In fact, I'm not sure any of the guys I just mentioned did any team drills. Maybe Chris Blair did, but the rest of those guys, for the most part, would look like they were just doing individual, but a great step nonetheless to see all of those guys get back practicing in some capacity. For an Isaiah McDuffie, 6th-round pick who hasn't had the opportunity to practice yet at a fairly crowded inside linebacker room. Going to be really important for him to show up big these next few weeks. Kingsley Keke, is somebody who the Packers are really hoping can step up in year 3. Really important for him to get some reps. Stanford Samuels needs all the reps if he wants to compete for a cornerback spot. And just, again, nice to see some of these players, whether it's Kevin King, Kamal Martin, back on the field. These, they may not seem like much, but again, for guys fighting for roster spots, every rep counts. And even those vets like Kevin King, who very well could be competing with Eric Stokes, for that starting spot. Good to see him back out there to be able to compete for that as well. So great to see on the injury front. On the downside, it looked like Devin Funchess went out with at least what seemed to be a semi-serious, I don't want to say serious in the fact like it could be out for a long time, but serious in the fact that he was definitely in pain and was really having trouble kind of walking very gingerly back to the Don Hudson Center and what I assume was the training room. Looked like he was kind of holding his left backside-ish area. I don't know if it was hip or backside or what it was, but just kind of, I don't know if it was lower back or who knows, but definitely was in a lot of pain, definitely was not able to continue in practice, and we'll see. I would be fairly surprised if he was able to go on Saturday just based on the condition he was in. I'm certainly not a doctor, and you never want to really hypothesize with injuries too much, but definitely didn't look great, and we'll see. Hopefully he can get back sooner rather than later, but this is a really crowded wide receiver room, as we all know, and the sooner that he can get back and practicing, the better. And hopefully it's nothing serious that's going to keep him out for like the remainder of the offseason or past that. Sometimes, those when we think there's going to be some really difficult decisions to be made at wide receiver, all of a sudden injuries take place and there's no more issue. Well, right now, Juwan Winfrey, Equinemius St. Brown, and then now Devin Funchess, all guys who are theoretically competing for that last spot. Right now, they're all injured, right? So that those injuries could play a massive, massive role in determining that sixth and final wide receiver spot if, in fact, they do end up keeping six receivers. So we'll see what happens there, but we'll definitely be keeping an eye on Devin Funchess' injury. Let's talk about Eric Stokes next because, again, as you know, I've been a little bit hard on Eric Stokes, the first couple weeks. Nothing egregious, right? I'm never going to judge a guy too much just for his first couple weeks in practice. But when you're a first-round pick, there's a certain level of expectation of how you'd like to see them practice. He really struggled those first couple weeks, and I mean really struggled his first couple weeks. I thought today was by far and away his best day of practice. He was much more locked down. There were a couple different routes just on the sideline. One against Devin Funchess, where Devin Funchess, was trying to give him a couple moves and run a comeback route. He was all over it. I forget what the second one was, but there was a second route as well, and I forget which wide receiver it was, but he just completely plastered the wide receiver, gave Rodgers and that specific rep no place to throw. It ended up going, I think, to Adams on the play, but a much, much better day and a very impressive day from Eric Stokes, just not giving up anything in coverage whatsoever. So that's the type of growth that you want to see from your first-round pick, and we're starting to see now. I've said I want to start seeing some flashes from Stokes at least. I'm not asking for perfect consistency from a rookie, but you want to start seeing some of those plays. You can see him slowly gaining confidence and really starting to just kind of, again, let things slow down a little bit. So I've mentioned the last few days where it's been getting progressively better here and there. And again, I thought on Thursday was his absolute best day of practice up until this point. Chris Barnes, another player that I want to touch base on just really quickly here. There's been talk of him, being a little bit lighter weight and playing faster. Made a very impressive play. And he wasn't blocked on the play, right? So it was a toss outside to A.J. Dillon, and it looked like they had everything set up perfectly. It was either Dillon or Tilley. I think it was Dillon. Toss outside, and it looks like they have everything set up perfectly. Out of nowhere flashes Chris Barnes, and to make the stop, not only like 2-3, but at the line of scrimmage. And it's just been so few and far between that we've seen these linebackers, be able to get sort of sideline to sideline and make those sort of stops. A lot of these stretch plays to the outside and tosses to the outside the last few seasons have really hurt the Packers. Go back and watch the 49ers games, a couple of years ago if you want a harsh reminder that. The Chargers game was a great example of that a couple of years ago. Even the Vikings in some of their games the last couple seasons with Dalvin Cook. There's been a lot of plays where, they're getting Green Bay to the outside and the linebackers just aren't getting to that spot, whether it was Blake Martinez, Christian Kirksey, etc. So to see Chris Barnes be able to make that play, not only 3, 4, 5 yards down the field, but at the line of scrimmage and make an impressive stop, that was a play that stood out to me at practice, just because most times Green Bay hasn't had the linebacker that's been able to get to that spot. And again, it was all set up perfectly, and then Barnes comes flying out of nowhere to make that stop. So nice play by him. Another player I wanted to go over is Randall Cobb. Randall Cobb looks like Randall Cobb. And I think what you're seeing is just a receiver that has a bit more veteran savvy, especially in knowing how to work the middle of the field. The vast majority of his catches in camp so far have come across the middle of the field. Rodgers has found him in stride, and he's been able to turn upfield and make plays. And that's what we saw out of Randall Cobb the vast majority of his career. And I think I may have talked about this before, but I think what we're going to see, we're obviously going to see a ton of Davante Adams on one side. I think we'll see MVS and Allen Lazard really kind of rotate as kind of that number two, and both of them get, somewhere between 30 to 40 snaps a game as that number two wide receiver. I think you're going to see Randall Cobb be the true traditional slot wide receiver. A lot of third downs, a lot of red zone, just because he knows how to uncover from corners, knows how to find soft spots in zones. I think he's going to add a decent amount of value in the middle of the field for the Packers. And I think one thing that maybe is under the radar a little bit here, as you may know, Aaron Rodgers has really kind of shied away from attacking the middle of the field. Robert Tonyan has been phenomenal in camp over the middle of the field. Randall Cobb, who Rodgers is going to want to target, that's his best friend, and he's going to want to get him involved, is working the middle of the field. If those two can become serious threats in the middle of the field, like defenses at times have just kind of hedged their bets on the sidelines because of how, not often Rodgers has attacked the middle of the field. If all of a sudden now the middle of the field is attackable with Randall Cobb and with Robert Tonyan, and Rodgers is willing to go to those guys because he trusts them a lot and wants to go to them a lot, then watch out, because now the safeties are going to have to watch everything. It's going to set up everything else much better. Safeties are going to have to be more focused on it, which is going to leave more big plays for MVS and Adams on the outside. Could even open up the running backs a little bit more. Could even open up some wheel routes for Josiah DeGuara, Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon, etc. So I'm very excited about how Randall Cobb could be used, and I think he is going to add a new element to the middle of the field that hasn't been there the last couple of years. So he had a few more catches in the middle of the field on Thursday, and again, he's fitting in really, really well with this Matt LaFleur offense. Adrian Amos had a play of the day. Jordan Love kind of targets a receiver. I think it was Malik Taylor down the field to the right side. I think it was Ento in coverage, but either way, like the coverage was pretty good, but he throws it up, and Adrian Amos, he's looked so good in that center field spot so far in training camp, just races over and makes a gorgeous interception. On Tuesday, he made that same play, dropped the pick. Today, he makes the play and makes the interception. Amos has looked really good in this new Joe Barry defense. I'm not going to get into the minutia of exactly what they're doing with the safeties, but I feel like Adrian Amos is taking to it very well, and he's having a very, very strong training camp so far. Another player that flashed a little bit, Chauncey Rivers, the newest edge rusher that they have in camp. I'm not ready to, crown Chauncey Rivers as anything, but I would almost go as far to say as even in the few days that he's been here, I think he's made more plays than Jonathan Garvin or even Tipa Naliai. Maybe Tipa's probably close, but it's certainly more than Jonathan Garvin has that I've seen throughout the entirety of training camp so far. So there's one really nice play where he sets the edge, gets into the backfield, makes a play, and then there was another one where he had a pressure in the backfield. Really nice day for Rivers, and he's somebody that has flashed in his first couple days at camp. Probably looking at more of a practice squad type player, but listen, as I mentioned earlier, that number 4 edge rusher spot should be wide open at the moment. Whether it's Tipa, whether it's a Chauncey Rivers, whether it's a Jonathan Garvin, I don't think there's anything for sure there right now. And Rivers has a ways to go. There's no question about that, but he's definitely flashed in his limited opportunities. I've been talking ad nauseum about Kylan Hill and about how he's looked as a running back. I've mentioned he's looked okay as a receiver, and he's still learning the nuances of pass protection, but better than most rookies. Well, let's talk about his receiving skills today, because he first of all, he's been the third down back with Aaron Jones out. So no A.J. Dillon there, no Patrick Taylor, no Dexter Williams. That has gone to Kylan Hill. He's the number 3 back. I'm just labeling it right now. Kylan Hill's going to be the number 3 back this season, and he's also going to be the starting kick returner, would be my guess. He has a pass in the middle of the field. I think it was Rodgers that found him, but Devondre Campbell's all over him. And the pass was a little bit lower. He's going to the ground. And again, Campbell's in there. It looks like he almost got his hand in there. Still comes up with the catch. So a nice play there. Nothing like spectacular. It's probably like a 6-7 yard gain. but still just coming down with a catch in a contested situation was a really good sign. And then they're doing 2-minute drill. And again, 2-minute drill, number one offense, all the starting offensive line, the receivers, the tight ends. Kylan Hill's the running back. Hill gets upfield. Rodgers throws it to him. Hill makes a great one-handed catch, literal one-handed catch in stride, and continues right upfield like it was no big deal. Like he's just been fantastic. There's no other way to put it. And he continues to make plays every single day. Like I said, you can quote me on it right now. If he's not the number 3 back, I'd be beyond shocked just based on how he's performed so far. He's had such an amazing camp. Another quick couple plays. Lucas Patrick had a one-on-one with TJ Slayton. This just goes to show technique wins over size and strength, right? TJ Slayton is a mammoth human being. He's held up well all camp. Lucas Patrick one-on-one versus Slayton, gets underneath his pads, drives Slayton 5 yards down the field, finishes the block. He didn't bring him to the ground. He probably could have if he wanted to, but it just goes to show you, like, Lucas Patrick is doing everything in his power this camp to stave off, both Ben Braden as well as John Runyon Jr. 2 of those 3 guys are going to start week 1, but remember, once David Bakhtiari comes back, if everyone's still healthy, there's only one starting spot between Lucas Patrick, John Runyon Jr., and Ben Braden. Tough to say who that would go to right now, but if I had to bet on it right now, I would say it's going to be Lucas Patrick. He's just been nothing but a pro's pro this entire offseason, and it's plays like that just show you he's still a pretty darn good technician. There was another play where I think it was he and Billy Turner got Preston Smith, and they both just got him to the ground. He's done nothing but try to prove himself as that starter day in and day out. And again, if I were betting right now, I would say that's Lucas Patrick's job to lose. Rodgers gets a free play. Defense caught with too many men on the field. Just vintage Aaron Rodgers. They get a nice completion down to Josiah DeGuara. Nothing like amazing about the play. This is something we've seen from Rodgers over and over and over. But the noteworthy piece here, Rodgers goes to Josh Myers after the play, gives him a tap on the helmet and a little bit of a hug. People forget that these free plays, whether it's offsides or whether it's too many men on the field, it takes everyone on offense, but the center has to be in lockstep with Aaron Rodgers. And for all the times that Aaron Rodgers has gotten credit for his incredible hard count and getting people off sides and, again, drawing defenses to get too many men on the field and things like that, Corey Linsley never got enough credit for how good he was at, as soon as someone was offsides, him snapping the ball right away and just making sure that Rodgers, they were so together, of one mind in those situations. So Josh Myers coming in, new guy, they've got to learn how to do that together. And that was Josh Myers' first test, I think, in camp of one of those free play opportunities, and he killed it. He was perfect on it, and Rodgers appreciated it afterwards. So that's going to be a fun thing to kind of keep an eye on as Rodgers tries to generate those free plays this season. Is Myers able to stay on the same page? One opportunity so far, and Myers passed it with flying colors. Josiah DeGuara, 3 receptions in team activities at least that I counted. Maybe he had more, but at least 3. Again, really showing up all over the place. They tried to hit him on a couple wheel routes. Again, another player who was attacking in the middle of the field. So I think this is going to be a player that gets a lot of those fullback, H-back snaps. He got a lot of snaps last year before he, and I think it was week 1, before he eventually went out with injury. This is, chess piece gets used way too often, but he's going to be a bit of a chess piece for Matt LaFleur in this offense. Don't be surprised if he continues to have a big role. We'll see, just how big of a role can an H-back have, we'll see. But I think he's a player that Matt LaFleur really likes and is going to use to the best of his ability. And I thought he had a really nice practice on Thursday as well. And then the last piece of news, Aaron Rodgers is going to be back on Pat McAfee on Tuesdays. I don't know about you, but I am incredibly excited for that. That was must-watch content all season last year. I think anytime you get to kind of peel back the curtain a little bit and hear Rodgers kind of talk about the season and what's going on and things like that, it just gives you such an insight into Rodgers, into the Packers. It's a really cool experience, and couldn't be more thrilled that that's happening again this upcoming year. And of course, McAfee and everyone on the show does such an incredible job with it as well. That's going to do it for me today. Thanks for joining me as always. Always appreciate it. I'll be right back here tomorrow, so make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.